ancient aliens, the great Egyptian pharaohs, and gods. Throughout history, pharaohs have come and gone, their legacies buried beneath the shifting sands of time. But one name echoes through the dark corridors of mystery louder than most: Akhenaten, the heretic king. Unlike his predecessors, who clung to Egypt's rich pantheon of gods, Akhenaten defied tradition. He cast aside millennia of belief and demanded his people worship only one being, Aten, the radiant disk in the sky. And when his tomb was finally opened in 1891 by Italian archaeologist Alessandro Barsanti, it did not reveal a mummified god king. It revealed nothing at all. Every legend hides a truth. Subscribe to dive deeper into the alien origins, sacred relics, and forbidden histories they never wanted you to know. In the golden sands of Amarna lies a mystery that has haunted archaeologists and theorists for over a century. When Italian archaeologist Alessandro Barsanti opened Pharaoh Akhenaten's royal tomb in 1891, many people expected to find something incredible. Here was the final resting place of one of history's most radical rulers, a pharaoh who had dared to erase the old gods and impose a new, singular divine force. But instead of golden sarcophagi and mummified royalty, Barsanti found something utterly confounding: an empty tomb. The tomb itself was carved deep into the rock, lavishly decorated with inscriptions, prayers to the Aten, and depictions of Akhenaten's family basking under the rays of a mysterious sun disk. It bore all the signs of having been built for a revered and powerful monarch. Yet the burial chamber had been left incomplete, and no remains of the pharaoh were found. No body, no coffin, no funerary treasures. It was as if the tomb had been prepared, but the body never arrived. Or worse, that it had been deliberately removed, erased from both sight and history. Mainstream scholars suggest several theories. One posits that Akhenaten may have been reburied elsewhere during the backlash that followed his death. After his reign, his successors, especially Pharaoh Tutankhamun and later Horemheb, sought to erase all traces of his radical reforms. Temples were destroyed, his name was chiselled off monuments, and his memory was declared damnatio memoriae, condemned and forgotten. Some believe his body may have been moved to avoid desecration, or stolen by grave robbers during chaotic times.
But the tomb looks unfinished and appears to have been hastily abandoned, suggesting that it may never have been used for its intended purpose. Then again, many royal tombs weren't completely finished when Egyptian kings died, and they were often buried in them anyway. So maybe he was, and then the tomb was later looted and his body desecrated.
He was, after all, considered a heretic. Or he could have been interred there, but after the abandonment of Amarna following his death, and the reversal of his religious reforms, maybe the authorities didn't leave him in the city he founded. But ancient astronaut theorists propose a far more chilling explanation. Akhenaten was never buried, because he was never truly meant to die on Earth. To them, the pharaoh's bizarre appearance, his elongated skull, narrow limbs, and androgynous physique, is more than artistic license. It is a biological anomaly, an anomaly best explained not by genetics, but by extraterrestrial influence. If Akhenaten was indeed a hybrid, part human and part other, then the possibility emerges that he returned to his origin, that his departure from this world was not burial but retrieval. Was the empty tomb a failed burial, or was it a decoy, a smokescreen to conceal a departure far beyond human comprehension? Akhenaten's disappearance remains one of the most disturbing questions in ancient history, a hole not just in the ground, but in the very narrative of civilization. And until it is answered, we are left with a tomb that whispers of something not quite human and not quite gone. But the mystery deepens when we consider not just Akhenaten himself, but the entity he worshipped, a deity unlike any other in Egyptian history. To the untrained eye, the depictions of Aten, the sole deity worshipped by Pharaoh Akhenaten, appear simple. A radiant sun disk stretching its rays downward, each beam ending in a hand offering life to the royal family. To Egyptologists, this is poetic iconography, a symbolic reverence for the sun's life-giving power. But for ancient astronaut theorists, these images are far more literal. They may represent a highly advanced extraterrestrial craft. Unlike any other god in the Egyptian pantheon, Aten had no human or animal form, no myths, no temples filled with statues. It was described solely as a disk that hovered in the sky. The choice to worship such an abstract and formless entity stands in stark contrast to Egypt's rich tapestry of anthropomorphic gods. Why abandon a millennium of religious tradition for a disk? Ancient writings and songs from Akhenaten's time describe Aten as a sun disk that rises between two mountains, shining light across the land and giving life through its rays. The disk is said to move silently, radiating order and direction, watching over the pharaoh. But this was not just spiritual devotion, it was practical, even logistical. Akhenaten shifted the empire's entire capital, relocating it from Thebes to a brand new city he named Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, positioned to align perfectly with the light of Aten at sunrise.
But none of these pharaohs achieved the notoriety or the infamy of Akhenaten. Many listeners will know Akhenaten for his religious revolution, for which he became known as the Heretic King. Akhenaten rejected the traditional polytheistic religion of his ancestors in favor of exclusive devotion to the Aten, the sun disk.
This relocation was not only strategic, it was symbolic. The entire city was laid out linearly to mirror Aten's path in the sky. Streets, temples, and palaces were designed to absorb the disk's light. Why would a ruler restructure his entire kingdom around a symbolic sun? Some theorists argue that Aten was not a star or deity, but a tangible technological presence, a UFO, an intelligence from beyond our world. The depiction of the rays ending in hands has been interpreted as robotic appendages or mechanical extensions, delivering knowledge, energy, or even biological material. If Akhenaten had direct contact with this being, his radical monotheism may not have been a religious act, it may have been a command. Could Aten have been a hovering vessel, appearing at dawn over the eastern mountains, communicating with Akhenaten, guiding him, demanding worship? If so, Akhenaten was not merely a heretic king, he was the chosen messenger of something not of this earth. Equally unsettling is how Akhenaten and his family were physically portrayed in images that raise even more questions about their origins. When one examines the statues and reliefs from the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, it becomes immediately clear that this was no ordinary man. Unlike the chiseled, muscular depictions of earlier pharaohs, Akhenaten is portrayed with an unusually elongated skull, narrow shoulders, wide hips, spindly limbs, and a swollen belly. These features were not limited to Akhenaten alone. His queen, Nefertiti, and their daughters were all rendered in the same uncanny manner. The consistency of these traits across multiple family members and countless pieces of art raises unsettling questions. Were these accurate depictions? And if so, what exactly were they depicting?
I think what it represents is the fact that Akhenaten is trying to tell us that his lineage and that of his daughters comes from a very different genetic bloodline, possibly directly back to Osiris himself, who is depicted as having an elongated head, the so-called ancient gods of pre-dynastic Egypt.
Traditional scholars once dismissed these images as artistic exaggeration or a symbolic attempt to portray the pharaoh as a more divine androgynous figure, an embodiment of both masculine and feminine aspects of creation. Some medical theories have also been proposed, including Marfan syndrome or Froelich syndrome, though neither fully explains the entire range of unusual features. Moreover, DNA testing of related mummies has failed to provide conclusive evidence of any known disorder. But ancient astronaut theorists argue that the statues should be taken literally, not metaphorically. The elongated skulls in particular resemble those discovered not just in Egypt, but also in Paracas, Peru, Malta, and parts of Africa. Many of these ancient skulls are shockingly large, not just in shape but in volume. What's more disturbing, some of them lack the sagittal suture, a fibrous joint that runs along the top of every human skull, marking where two parietal bones fuse after birth. Head binding, a cultural practice in many ancient societies, can reshape a skull's appearance, but it cannot increase cranial volume, and it does not erase sutures. The absence of this critical bone seam points to something far more anomalous, a different species entirely, one not born of Earth.
Archaeology forever has been saying that we have the answers, that we have the timeline, we know when Khufu built this, we know when Khafre built this, we know who did this, and they're not correct. It's not accurate. It's too weird. There's no way you have all the information. Also, where'd everybody go? Like, there's people living there, but it's clearly not the same civilization. So what happened to this insane civilization? If there wasn't a collapse of society at an immense level, if there wasn't some sort of a civilization-destroying event, then where did what happened?
Could Akhenaten's lineage represent the first human-alien hybrids, the product of genetic engineering by extraterrestrial beings, to proponents like Giorgio A.? Toukalos. These skulls are not curiosities. They are fossilized evidence of contact. They believe Akhenaten was either chosen or created to fulfill a purpose on Earth to bridge humanity with something higher, or perhaps something far more dangerous. If this theory holds even a grain of truth, it forces a terrifying reconsideration of ancient history. Akhenaten's royal bloodline may not have been merely noble, it may have been non-human. The pharaohs were not just kings. They may have been living relics of an ancient alien experiment, their secrets encoded not just in stone or scroll, but in their very bones. Yet Akhenaten was not the first to suggest contact with something beyond. For that, we must turn our eyes west, to the Giza Plateau and its silent guardian. Rising silently from the desert sands of Giza, the Great Sphinx has long haunted the imagination of travellers, scholars, and mystics. With the body of a lion and the head of a man, it stands as one of the most enigmatic monuments on Earth. For centuries, only its head was visible. Above the dunes, a weathered face staring east toward the rising sun. But in 1925, French engineer Émile Barrès undertook a massive excavation and revealed its full form, a colossal guardian carved from a single slab of limestone, stretching over 240 feet long. What he also uncovered, nestled between the Sphinx's paws, was something even more mysterious: the dream stain. Commissioned by Thutmose IV, this stone tablet records a fantastical vision the young prince claimed to have received during a nap in the Sphinx's shadow. In the dream, the Sphinx, a supposedly lifeless statue, spoke to him. It promised him the throne of Egypt if he would free it from the sands that buried it. What makes this story so disturbing is not just the idea that a stone statue might have spoken, but the language and imagery used in the stele. It mentions the eye of the Lord, a flashing light that watches over the land, an entity that chooses rulers and guides destiny. To ancient astronaut theorists, this is not a mere metaphor. It is a veiled reference to advanced technology. Could this eye have been a form of surveillance, a spacecraft, a beacon from another world? If the Sphinx was more than a monument, if it was a machine or receiver of cosmic communication, then Thutmose IV's dream takes on an entirely different meaning. He may not have had a divine vision. He may have had contact. The idea that his rise to power was influenced not by lineage, but by an extraterrestrial signal, opens a chilling possibility that his bloodline was guided, chosen, or even genetically shaped by alien intelligence.
The Dreamsteel inscription was made as a propaganda tool for a new king, Thutmose IV. Thutmose was not first in line to succeed his father, Amenhotep II. So, in order to justify his right to the throne, he needed to link himself to the gods and to the great ancient site of Giza. The inscriptions you see here tell a story that occurred when he was a young prince. The horizontal lines of hieroglyphs describe how the Sphinx appeared to Thutmose in a dream and promised him the throne if he would only clear the sand away from its body.
And who was his descendant? Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who would later abandon all gods in favor of one glowing disk in the sky. Is it possible, then, that the dream stele is not just a historical curiosity, but the first record of a human-ET interaction? If the Sphinx truly served as an ancient interface between Earth and the stars, then Thutmose IV's dream may have been an invitation, and Akhenaten its ultimate fulfillment, a ruler born not just to govern, but to worship, communicate with, and perhaps return to the beings from beyond the sky. As we move from monuments to rituals, we find even more clues buried in Egypt's most sacred practice, the art of mummification. The process of mummification in ancient Egypt remains one of the greatest technological and spiritual marvels of the ancient world. The level of anatomical understanding, chemical precision, and ritual consistency displayed by Egyptian embalmers is staggering, especially when you consider that no official instructional texts have ever been found. For thousands of years, generations of priests and embalmers somehow preserved the bodies of their dead with an almost supernatural accuracy, halting decay in some cases for millennia. The technique involved removing internal organs, carefully extracting the brain through the nasal cavity, and bathing the body in natron salt to desiccate the tissues. Then the corpse was wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen, adorned with protective amulets, and laid to rest in elaborately prepared tombs. Despite modern science uncovering the how, the Egyptians left behind no scrolls explaining the why, other than their insistence that the process was a gift from the gods. And among those gods, none was more central to mummification than Anubis, the jackal-headed deity who presided over embalming and guided souls through the perilous journey to the afterlife. But depictions of Anubis have long raised unsettling questions. Why a jackal? Why a humanoid body with an animal head? To ancient astronaut theorists, Anubis may not have been mythological at all. He may have been a real, physical entity, a being not entirely human, with access to knowledge far beyond the technology of Bronze Age Egypt. Even more curious is the ancient Egyptians' obsession with the star Sirius, known as the Dog Star. Sirius's heliacal rising each year coincided with the flooding of the Nile, an event that brought life and prosperity to the land. It also marked the beginning of the Egyptian New Year, and was closely tied to rituals of death, rebirth, and transformation. Could this alignment be more than a coincidence? Some researchers believe Sirius was not just a celestial marker, but a point of origin, that beings from the Sirius star system visited Earth and shared their knowledge with the Egyptians, including the sacred science of biological preservation and spiritual ascension. Anubis, they argue, was not a myth, but a representative of a Sirius-based intelligence, whose appearance was preserved in hybrid imagery to conceal or encode the truth. If so, mummification was never simply about preserving the body. It was about preparing it for something more, a state of stasis, a suspended transformation, possibly even for return to the stars. The tombs of Egypt may not have been final resting places at all, but biological capsules, preserving vessels for a journey yet to come. This connection between the heavens and the rulers of Egypt was never more apparent than in the way pharaohs were revered, not just as kings, but as divine beings. In the spiritual framework of ancient Egypt, pharaohs were far more than rulers. They were living gods, considered the earthly embodiment of Horus, and, upon death, the spiritual son of Osiris, the lord of the underworld. This divine status gave them absolute authority, not just in politics, but in matters of religion, law, and even the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that their pharaohs were direct links to the heavens, cosmic intermediaries who maintained Ma'at, the balance between chaos and order. But then came Akhenaten, and he shattered everything. Akhenaten not only abolished the worship of Egypt's rich pantheon of gods, but he also declared that only one god existed, Aten, a radiant disk in the sky. Temples to Amun, Ra, Isis and Osiris were closed, statues destroyed, and even inscriptions of the old gods were chiseled out from monuments. He moved the capital from Thebes to a newly built city called Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, entirely devoted to Aten. This was not mere heresy, it was a spiritual coup. Why would a pharaoh, raised in the traditions of divine kingship and surrounded by the most powerful priesthood in the ancient world, risk complete alienation from his society? According to ancient hymns and records left behind in Amarna, Akhenaten claimed he was personally visited by Aten, a being of light who spoke directly to him. This entity did not appear in dreams or visions. It was described in literal terms as radiant, hovering, and commanding. It said to him, "I am your God," and the people, perhaps terrified, perhaps awestruck, believed him. This encounter changed everything. Akhenaten no longer ruled as the son of Osiris. He claimed direct descent from Aten, not a spiritual metaphor, but a biological truth. His distorted appearance, elongated skull, and strange bodily proportions were not artistic quirks. They were manifestations of his divine origin, or, as ancient astronaut theorists argue, evidence of extraterrestrial heritage. Could it be that Akhenaten was not just a spiritual revolutionary, but a hybrid, a genetic anomaly planted among humans to change their spiritual direction? Was Aten not a god, but a being from another world, using Akhenaten as a messenger or even a prototype? If so, then Akhenaten's reign was not a failed experiment in monotheism. It was the first open contact between Earth and an alien intelligence, a contact that was later buried, erased, and silenced until now. Nowhere is this question more potent than in the lost city Akhenaten built a place that may have been designed not for humans but for contact. The ancient city of Akhetaten, now known as Amarna, rises out of the Egyptian desert like a half-buried scar, silent, wind-worn, and abandoned. But beneath the sand lies a blueprint not for a mere capital, but a message carved in stone, a transmission from a pharaoh who may have been more than human, designed not for men, but for the gods of the sky. Akhenaten chose the location for Amarna with eerie precision. He claimed it was a place shown to him by Aten, a spot untouched by previous temples or shrines. It was to be the one place on earth dedicated solely to the worship of the sky disk. Everything was constructed with one goal, to align with the movement and presence of Aten in the heavens. The main axis of the city runs directly east-west, mimicking the trajectory of the sun, or, as some theorists propose, the flight path of a hovering craft that descended from the eastern horizon each morning. Unlike other Egyptian cities built for the dead, Amarna had no central necropolis, no Valley of the Kings, and few lasting burial complexes. This stark absence of funerary monuments has led some researchers to suggest that the city's focus was not death, but communication, an operational hub for something that came from beyond. The flat terrain, wide roads, and unadorned temples served no ceremonial function that we can identify, but they may have functioned as navigational beacons or visual markers, visible from the sky and designed for a returning craft. Further compounding the mystery are now lost records and temple fragments, some of which allegedly referenced a burning wheel in the sky, a visitor of light, and the one who came with no voice but whose presence was thunder. These cryptic lines, if real, hint at an early UFO encounter that Akhenaten interpreted not as an anomaly, but as divine instruction. He was not building Amarna for humans. He was preparing it for a return. The abrupt collapse of Amarna after Akhenaten's death only adds to the mystery. His successors destroyed his city, desecrated his name, and buried his legacy. Why such violent erasure? Perhaps they feared not just his ideology, but the truth of his encounter. Perhaps Amarna was too close to the stars, too dangerous to remain. Was Amarna a failed religious revolution? Or was it an abandoned spaceport, a city built for beings who never came back? And if Amarna was the site of first contact, perhaps another ancient structure hides something even more extraordinary, a gateway not just to knowledge but to the stars. In the shadow of the Great Pyramid, buried deep beneath the sands of Giza, lies one of Egypt's most enigmatic sites, the so-called Tomb of Osiris. But this is no ordinary tomb. Discovered in 1999 by Dr. Zahi Hawass, the structure consists of a multi-level shaft system that descends more than 100 feet into the earth, carved directly into the limestone bedrock. At the lowest level lies a submerged chamber filled with dark, stagnant water. Within that eerie basin rests a large, empty granite sarcophagus, sealed but without a body, no inscriptions, no funerary goods, just silence. To most archaeologists, it's a perplexing ritual site. But to ancient astronaut theorists, it may be one of the most important clues to Egypt's cosmic legacy. The tomb is aligned with the Orion constellation, a pattern often associated with the god Osiris, whom the ancient Egyptians believed ruled over the afterlife and the stars. The alignment is not accidental. To those who believe in the Stargate theory, this is a map of a terrestrial anchor point for a celestial portal. Legends passed down through Egyptian mythology speak of boats of light that carried the gods through the Du'a, the underworld. These were not wooden vessels, but luminous divine transport vehicles that could phase between worlds. The pyramid texts of Unas speak of a pharaoh ascending through the doors of the sky, escorted by a radiant, serpent-like force. What if these were not metaphors for death, but literal accounts of departure through interdimensional passageways? Water, always a symbol of spiritual transition, is present in the lowest chamber, but its presence may also suggest something more physical. In quantum physics, liquid media are known to enhance field stability. Perhaps this chamber was constructed to stabilize interdimensional activity, a literal launch pad cloaked in religious ritual.
Few years ago, a major discovery happened for the first time. It is the first time that we have written evidence about building the Pyramid of Khufu.
When did this happen?
3 years ago.
Really?
It's called the Wadi el-Jarf papyri.
Oh.
Do you want to know what's in this papyri?
I do.
This papyri was found in Sinai, in a port belongs to Khufu. And inside this port, there was caves. And inside the caves, found remains of boat and this big papyri. It's large, huge.
There it is.
That's it, exactly. Okay?
And what does this say?
Now,
First of all, how old is that?
4,600 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
And
You
listen,
could find writing.
In this-
4,600. So papyrus was made with animal skin, correct?
no, papyrus
No?
was of papyrus, from the papyri.
Right. What is
The papyri is just like leaves.
Akhenaten, whose lineage traces back to Thutmose IV, connected to the dream stele, may have known of this portal. His devotion to Aten, his physical anomalies, and his sudden disappearance all point to something more than spiritual belief. Perhaps he didn't die. Perhaps he departed, returning to a place not on this earth, but among the stars. If the Osiris shaft is a stargate, then Egypt's tombs were not graves. They were gateways, not for the dead, but for the divine. In conclusion, Akhenaten did not die as pharaohs do. His body was never found. His memory was nearly erased. But the echoes of his presence remain in the architecture, the hymns, the art, and the skulls. His vision, his transformation, and his strange religion all point to a terrifying conclusion. He was chosen by something from the stars. We appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next revelation.